Welcome back to Two Pastors and a Mic. My name is Shannick.
And I'm Corey.
And we are so grateful for you. Wherever you're listening from, we appreciate you. If you would, just take a few minutes. Would you leave us a review wherever you're listening to this episode, whatever platform you're on, whether it's Apple, please rate us, leave a review. If you're on Spotify, leave a hopefully positive star review. And then if you're listening from different platforms that you're not able to leave a review, just reach out to us. I don't know. We've actually had a lot of people over the last month text us, email us, and it's been awesome. Matter of fact, I shared this with our church this past Sunday that there was, I guess, one specific person I'm thinking of that reached out from the Netherlands, that he got a hold of us and in contact through our podcast. Now he's watching our services, and he now calls Hill City home. So
pretty sweet.
Yeah, shout out to Peter Jantz from the Netherlands. That's amazing. We love that. But wherever you're listening from, we're so grateful you're spending just a little bit of time with us. Hopefully you have found this resource to be helpful and encouraging, and that's why we continue to do that. Matter of fact, we would appreciate also if you would share this episode if you find it encouraging, or just share the podcast in general with a friend. And there's a little bit of a shameless plug with that. Of course, we want you to share this podcast. We think it's great, but the feedback we've gotten from listens and downloads, we hopefully are on track. I'm just going to throw it out there because you mentioned it right before we recorded this, that we're on track to hit 50,000 possibly by December 31st. So let's hit that goal. Let's do it.
Help us hit that goal. Share it with somebody who needs us. And welcome all of you joining us on YouTube to see our beautiful faces. Man, end of summer almost upon us. We are in a series on sevens. We didn't plan this.
Nope.
It wasn't something that was like on our docket. We need to do
Off
this.
the cuff.
We started a couple episodes talking about 7 things, 7 reasons why Jesus was not sacrificed for sins, 7 reasons why Jesus actually had to die, 7 proponents of identity. And so we're just going to keep it with this theme. We have no idea how long, how many episodes
we know it'll go another few weeks, but who knows? We'll see.
But I'm actually really excited about today's episode, 7 barriers to relationships. And it was actually inspired. You did 6 of these in a sermon back in our 2020 series called Make It Known, week 3 to be exact. If you want to go back and check out the whole episode for more context, you can.
Yeah, Make It Known, week 3.
Make It Known, week 3. But 7 barriers to relationships. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people, and now that I'm in the counseling world, of how many people make a life-altering decision, and that life-altering decision probably would have been avoided had they had real connection with friends.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I've texted you so many times out of the last just couple weeks, but I'm just thankful for our friendship, because many people just don't have deep and meaningful relationships and friendships, and that's awful. In fact, in the counseling world, they'll tell you that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection, which if you think about that from AA, from drugs, from everything, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection, because people long for and need real connection in life.
Yeah, I love that.
You're not going to piggyback. I thought you were going to piggyback that. So anyways, this week we got 7 barriers to relationships. They all end with call, because that's how Shannick works. But I think they're going to be very interesting. These are some things that I personally struggle with, but also some things that I notice in other people that sometimes it causes me to put a boundary up, because I don't necessarily want these types of people involved in my life at a major level, because these things can be a turnoff to all of us, and you'll see why here in just a minute. So why don't you do the odds, I'll do the evens.
Gotcha.
Make it simple.
Okay, yeah. So these are the 7 barriers to relationship. Now, these aren't all of the barriers. These are just things that we found in this idea of coming up with 7 different barriers. And like you said, they do all end with call, and you'll see how all this plays out as we go through them. But the first barrier to relationship is really just being around people that are too critical. Mm-hmm. Critical is the barrier, right? And no one really wants criticism, at least negative criticism anyway. And even with constructive criticism, I think a lot of times there has to be some type of relationship there to give feedback. And of course, one of the things that we've been learning and processing over the last year is really asking for what we need, and then just sitting in the space and not even, and the opposite of that, not providing feedback or criticism unless someone is looking for it.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of times, like after messages or things that we present or communicate, the two of us will process together, and we will ask each other, or I'll ask you anyway, hey, how did that come across? How did, and honestly, you're really blunt and honest with me. There's times where you say, hey, that was maybe top 5 message you've ever preached. You communicated well. There's no critique. There's nothing to add. And then there's other times where it's like, well, that wasn't quite your best. And then I'm like, okay, well, why? Well, content was good, but you could have done this and this between these points. And so like, I really like value that feedback, but it's because we have a relationship.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily,
And it's a two-way street.
I don't take it to heart,
Yeah.
and I know you want the best for me.
Well, I also want when I praise you, I want it to matter. And if every time you asked for feedback in a real relationship like we have, and I was always like, oh, top 5 message, oh, top 10 message, eventually my praise would be redundant. It wouldn't matter because it's always good. And so I kind of want you to know when it's good, I mean it. It is good. And that again, that's part of our relationship though, and why it matters. In fact, I think a lot of us, this is something for me that you challenged me probably 5 years ago. I was in the system that I grew up in the church world. I think it was a learned habit, to be honest, because I was in such a critical environment of how to perfect the Sunday morning service and how to perfect guest experiences and all this stuff that is so much church verbiage, which I'm so turned off by today, probably because the pendulum was swung so high. And you challenged me around, man, you are so critical, because I can find improvement in everything, but sometimes improvement isn't necessary when it forsakes a relationship or it does more damage than good. You got to learn where to push and pull in that type of environment and whatnot. But you were like, man, it was bleeding over into areas of life where I didn't need to be critical. And you really challenged me around this. In fact, even Ted Lasso challenged me. We've talked about it a lot, is be less judgmental and
More curious.
And so that has been something that I've tried to adopt. I feel like I've done a really good job, but still need work on because I am overly critical. And honestly, I'm learning the art of just shutting my mouth, because sometimes when you shut your mouth, your relationships can grow a lot. And it doesn't mean you have to be fake or you restrain something. Sometimes boundaries are necessary and hard conversations are necessary for relationships to grow. But I was finding myself on the other side of the spectrum, just being overly critical about everything.
Yeah, and I remember that conversation, and I think I even expressed it to you, and I saw it in you because it was something that was evident in my own life. Because the way that we process, the way that we think, and the high level people that we are, I'm going to call us that, we tend to criticize, but it's because we want to empower. We want things to get better. We want to come alongside. Okay, we have this. Now, how can we make it better? And that's our constant mindset. But I think sometimes we get lost, or it's lost on us, maybe how something or good something really is already, because all we do is look through a critical lens, and then we can't appreciate what's right in front of us happening in the moment. So that's like the challenge to you as we go through these 7. Are you a critical person?
Yeah.
Like that's what you have to ask as we go through all 7 of these. Do you have some of this in your life that you can maybe diminish or maybe need to diminish or remove so that you can actually connect with people? And like you said earlier, I guess this is, I wasn't thinking it at the time. Sorry, I left you hanging earlier, but this is where I would say that would come in. Like if the opposite of addiction is connection, these are ways that we can truly connect and build those valuable, lasting relationships, because you're right. People do long for that. In the conversations I've had, I mean, not just over the last few months, but over the last few years, especially since COVID, is it like woke people up to this idea that, man, a lot of them are living in isolation. They are lonely. And I'll say this as well, because right there, I think it's a proverb. Can't remember. Don't know the address in Proverbs, but I always used to think it said there is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Well, that counselor are people that you trust, have their friendships with. You have a relationship built where you do value their counsel, but the verse actually says there's safety in a multitude of counselors. And so to live this life where we can have safety around us because of the people around us speaking into our life, and maybe they can expose some of this stuff. So consider us your safe counselors in your life right now as we go through these 7, and maybe we'll call something out that you do have active in your life that you need to really work on to diminish so that you can build up these valuable relationships. And the first one is, are you too critical?
Man, I've never heard that verse. There's safety. It's not wisdom.
It's not wisdom.
Safety. I mean, that changes the whole definition of the verse.
Yeah, it's not.
It
There's
makes sense.
Yeah, it's not wisdom. It's safety in a multitude of counselors. And so, if you want to find out and go more in a deep dive, if you feel like, you know what, I might be maybe a little too critical. Well, before you just label yourself that, and before you go on a deep dive working on yourself, maybe check out episode 7.
Yeah,
Like,
back in the olden days.
This is like what, 137?
Yeah.
So like
Wow.
episode 7, and that is all about dealing with criticism, and really how to be more of a coach than a critic.
Yep.
And maybe that'll really help you out. So that's the first barrier.
For sure. The second barrier is hypocritical. And this is a major barrier in the church world, which is kind of like an unfair criticism towards hypocrisy in the church. Now, I'm not talking about hypocrisy where there's abuse. That needs to be addressed. But we're all going to struggle with something, or we're all not going to live exactly how we preach. Now, I want to, we try to, but again, hypocritical is one of those things that is very, it's a big turnoff for people. Like, we have to learn and be okay with putting down the mask that we oftentimes create, because as you said, safety gives people the opportunity to remove this mask, and people only wear masks when there's judgment. So that goes back to even the criticism is, man, when I'm around safe people, I feel like I can be myself, but I have my guard up, especially as a pastor, because people judge pastors for specific things. And
Yeah.
especially
because we communicate,
Yeah.
and you communicate for a living. So we can say a lot of things, and we can know what to say and what to do or how to live your life. But then a lot of times pastors may be the worst at not following what they preach.
Yeah, and
So that's
It's easy to
hypocritical.
preach. It is, because it's so easy to preach. It's hard to live it out. And I try to be a type of communicator that preaches to myself. Like these
Yeah.
sermons I preach
Oh,
are
yeah.
what I'm currently going through. I'm trying to look like Jesus as well, And so I do believe in a lot of grace, but there's so many times in our lives that we can be hypocritical, and it is a barrier for me personally. And I'm like, man, that person's a hypocrite, but I also want to give grace, but it is a barrier.
Yeah, and so I would say one of the things that you can work on to diminish this barrier, or to lessen it in your life, is to walk with integrity, right? Integrity is just doing what you say you'll do. And I think that's a big step in living less hypocritical,
Yeah.
for sure.
Paul Young said that. He said, my responsibility in the episode he had with us, he goes, my responsibility is to do the next right thing. And I love that.
Yeah.
It is simple.
Love it. So the third barrier to relationship is political
Oh, man.
political differences. And I'll just be honest, there is nothing that makes me want to just run out of a room faster when you get two people on different sides of the spectrum going at it, and neither will listen to the other, and it's all just gibberish, and it's for nothing. And so many people have built up mega walls. I mean, like 100 feet high, 10 feet thick. Like the walls are like almost impenetrable. Oh my gosh, is that a word? I think that is a word.
You're asking the wrong guy.
But those walls are so, like, I don't know, that they're up in people's life when it comes to political differences, and they will not budge. I've seen more stubbornness over political differences, especially even within the lives of believers. And like what you were saying earlier with that Ted Lasso quote, it does play out almost every single day in our lives when we think about it. But, be less judgmental and more curious. And people on both sides of the aisle, they don't take the time to be curious or ask questions like, why do you see it this way? And they see it as a very like black and white matter on a lot of different things, where most of our life is lived in the gray, and they're not willing to go there. So,
and I would just give some encouragement in the political realm. I know a lot of our political beliefs are honestly given to us in the environment that we grow up in. And I want to encourage you is maybe learn a little bit more in the political realm, maybe learn a little bit more about policy or why you vote the certain way. Don't just always believe that conservatives are the Christian perspective and liberals are not. That is such a whack perception. I know very healthy and loving liberals, you know what I mean, that even a part of our church. And so I think you can learn a lot. I think you'd be surprised on how much you agree with the opposing views. And we tend to major on the minors, or there's one or two topics that were really hot, and we side on the fence and ignoring someone's completely lived experiences or understandings. And it's kind of a turnoff. In fact, I'll make a big political statement right here. My 8-year-old son came home from school and he said, "Dad, Ronaldo's better than Messi." And I was like, well, okay, 1, you're 8. 2, you've never watched a soccer game in your life. 3, what are their first names? Couldn't answer it. Like, he just learned this. But we had a very fun conversation about Ronaldo and Messi, which is a polarizing view.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's not political, but could be to some people. And I just got to sit down with my 8-year-old and teach him, hey, if you're going to have an opinion about something, you better know why you have an opinion about something, and at least educated instead of just going with what your friend said. And Julie even got in the conversation. It was a really fun evening of sports talks, because if you know my wife, she hates what she calls sports balls.
Yeah.
And so it was just fun. But again, it reminded me, hey, if you're going to have an opinion on a topic, whether it be political or not, you better know why you had that opinion, and you better have resources to back it up. Because a lot of people are like, there's this TikTok account I follow. Again, not to get political, but I will. They're called The Good Liars. And I like a lot of their content. I don't like other parts of their content, but they go around these like Trump rallies and they ask these people interviews, and it is just hilarious. Great content. People don't know why they have these beliefs, and then they're challenged, and they're like, I don't know, I heard. And it's just like, oh, and I know both sides of the aisle do it. It's just sad to me. So the fourth one, parasitical. And I love this one. In fact, we might do a sermon series someday around. Have we done a sermon series around this specific view?
I don't think so. I think just several messages.
Several messages that people can be vampires in your life. And what we mean by a vampire is there are people in your life that suck the life out of you.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a vampire. And man, I really try not to be this type of person. I don't want to be the type of person that when I walk into the room, because I walk into a room, the fun gets sucked out, or my body language shifts an atmosphere because I'm present with a negative attitude. And I recognize there are seasons of life that are hard, and you can't always walk into a room excited to be alive. I get that. But that's a challenge for me, because I want to be the type of person that sometimes forces a smile even when I don't want to, because I recognize that my body language and appearance and energy in any given room can dictate the atmosphere of that room. And so I don't want to be a parasitical person, but I know people in my life that can be parasitical. And it's like, oh, here they're calling again. What do they want? And it is a barrier to relationship.
100%. And I have those people in my life as well. I think going into it, knowing that you want a relationship with someone is and this is for you listening, if you feel like you struggle with this, or maybe you've never thought about this before and now you need to, in a relationship, are you more of a giver or a taker? And there are times maybe for both, but at least it should be expressed. And I know like Brene Brown does this whole thing on, you don't, marriage isn't 50-50. Each person brings 100% of themselves to the relationship. But there are times where people might be exhausted and wiped out, or some traumatizing stuff or bad news or whatever in their day, and they come home, but they can express to their spouse, hey, honestly, I'm running on about 20% right now, just letting you know, which kind of means, okay, I need you to give and step up a little bit. I'm going to take today. I need time. I need space. I need you to cook the dinner. I need this from you. I need this from you. But it was communicated, right? And I think the problem is when we get in those relationships where it tends to be one-sided and one person is always taking, I promise you the one that's giving in that relationship is getting a little fed up with you taking all the time. So it's just something to be mindful of.
And speaking of the marriage stuff, in marriage counseling, we talk about the 80-20 principle, which is not our thing. It's
the Pareto principle.
It's a what?
Pareto is the dude's name.
There
Pareto
it is.
Principle.
So there's the credit. But it's like we love 80% of our spouse, but we tend to focus on the 20%, which is not going to change, and you can't change it. And what happens is we make the 20% the 80%. Or even when you have conversation with people that have had an affair, they like had an affair with that 20%, and then they realize that 20% is a fantasy, and the 80% of that person that you had an affair with is not who you want to be with anyways. Right. And then it's like, oh no, what am I doing with my life? And I want to encourage you is to focus on the 80% in people that you love or that is good, that you can see right up front, because there's no such thing as that I don't know what I was trying to say there, but
I got
that 80-20 principle.
No, it's good. Okay, so the fifth barrier to relationship is egotistical. Egotistical. These are, I would say, people that struggle with pride, and they think that they are above people. And these kind of people in your life right away. As soon as I said an egotistical person, you probably immediately thought of someone. The guy that's always, having to one up, maybe, your conversation, your vacation, where you went to eat, or your viewpoints, and then they're very quick to tell you why they're wrong, why you are wrong, based on their experiences and their beliefs or whatever the case may be. And so, I think, with prideful people, it's one of those things where it is a turnoff for a lot of people. And so I think, I can't think of the verse off the top of my head, but like when we're following after Jesus, right, we're supposed to be concerned with the needs of others. And of course, when you're only concerned with your own needs, how you're getting fed, in the relationship, what's in it for you, it kind of comes across as very better than and uppity, and people just don't like that.
Yeah,
And
you
so,
can read this in people pretty easy.
Yeah.
For sure. Number 6 is hysterical. And what we mean by hysterical is the people that are uncontrolled, extreme emotional human beings. They go to 1,000% right away, and everything's a big deal, and they don't have a good grip of their emotional health or even the emotional health of a room. And this is the type of people that we explain this in counseling, is when you've grown up with chaos, sometimes when life is not chaotic, it feels not right because that's not your normal. So you will create chaos in your life to feel normal. It's like a drug.
That's so so normal. There are so many people that do that.
Mm-hmm. And you just got to become aware of it. And maybe this is your hint to start becoming an emotionally healthy human being.
Yep. Work on your what's like the health IQ called, your EQ, your emotional intelligence, and how you're affecting the people around you. And I will say, we want to be people that can handle and contain, I think is the word, right? Even in TLP process, like there's this idea of if people come to us and they want like just containment, I'm getting ready to blow up, I'm going to go crazy, a lot of like stuff's happened in my life, I'm going to get super emotional, super vulnerable, and just spew it all out, but can you contain it? And I think, again, all these come back to things that are communicated.
Yep.
Like communication is so key. And if you fall into one of these areas, just maybe start to be aware of it, recognize it, and then allow that other person in your life that you have the relationship with or want the relationship. Hey, this is what's going on today. And just let you know, I'm going to be a little hysterical today. Or you can say, hey, here's what I got going on. I'm kind of fearful right now because I heard this news, and yeah, I'm sorry. This might be a little political right now, but this is where I'm at, and this is why I'm here. Like if those things are expressed, people will lean in and engage more. And these barriers become less barrier to relationship when it's communicated.
Honestly, that's such a good point, because there's been times that I've been like, look, I am extremely emotionally drained from counseling all day today. I'm trying to not have it be attached to me, but I'm not doing okay with it. I just need to have a moment. And, your moments are allowed. We're not saying that you have to be perfect in every one of these areas, but I love that you use the A word, awareness. Awareness is key of everything. Awareness is key of all of your emotional growth, because if the people that I find that are like, man, I just don't want to be a bad dad. I'm like, you're not going to be a bad dad. I can already tell you, because the people that are bad dads aren't thinking. They're not thinking about whether or not they're a good dad or bad dad. So just for that.
No, it's good. And then the last one, the 7th barrier to relationship, is biblical.
Oh man, we went
biblical. So no, it's okay. I will say for more on this, if you want to check out episode 81, biblical versus Christ-like, and what is the difference, that would be a great place to start on a deep dive into this. Also, you told me that it was one of our most downloaded episodes on our podcast, is that specific episode. So if you've been following along with us and you can't remember what that was about, go back and check it out. If you're just now joining us on this podcast, it would be good for the next episode to go back and listen to episode 81. But when we mean what we mean by biblical is you're that type of person that sometimes isn't relevant or isn't really attuned to the need because you just want to spout out maybe a Bible verse, or you have a certain way of looking at things and you say it's from a biblical worldview, but maybe that biblical worldview was found in a different covenant, even not in the one that we live in today. And it's not very helpful for you to express, a Mosaic covenantal promise when that's not the promises that we're under today. Things like this, right? So we're supposed to be more Christ-like than biblical. And so a lot of people can use the Bible to beat people up And of course, we don't want you to be that type of person, right? A lot of people are, call them Bible thumpers, hitting people over the head with the Bible and Bible verses and how they should be living and all these other things. When really Jesus teaches how can we come alongside and just continue to serve people, even practically, wash their feet or whatever it may be. Not that we're literally going to wash people's feet, but you know what I mean.
Figuratively. I actually do have a controversial one because to speak on real quick, because when you go back and listen to 81, I don't think we touch on this, so I will touch on this here, just because I've had 3 different conversations with people about gay marriage. And one specifically was a really good conversation, but she said, and she brought it back, I just believe in a biblical marriage. And I said, what do you mean by a biblical marriage? And she said, 1 man and 1 wife. And I said, okay, that's from Genesis, which was not really talking about a biblical marriage in the context that you're using it for. That was for reproduction. But we can find a whole lot of different biblical marriages. I mean, polygamy was, according to God, was accepted in certain views. Taking women for marriage was actually appropriate in the war world. When you killed all the men, you would take the women. So what about Samson, who had 1,000 wives? What about
Solomon?
Solomon.
Like
what about
900 wives?
Yeah. What about David and all these? And then you go through all these people. Or are we talking about what Paul said when he condemned marriage altogether? Like, do you agree with Paul? Or what about Jesus, who lived single? So, like, when we talk about examples of a biblical marriage, there's a plethora of biblical marriages. And so I just wanted to make sure this person was talking about 1 man and 1 wife, and then she was like, oh, wait, what? She'd never heard that perspective before. And I wasn't saying that as like, well, this is what I believe and this is what you have to do. I was just giving some perspective on this. She was standing on using a word, biblical.
Or a phrase.
A phrase, but she didn't even know what that brought to the conversation. And so many of us, because of how we were raised, we're like, oh, I just want this to be biblical. And this is why we do talk about the difference between being biblical and being Christ-like, because people used the Bible to condone slavery for hundreds of years because the Bible talked about slavery. And this, again, do you want to live biblical or do you want to live Christ-like? Because obviously we know where Christ stands on that issue. And so it's just very gives you this ability to be a little bit less dogmatic and a little bit more curious, even in the conversations around biblical.
Yeah, so there are the 7 barriers to relationship, the 7 calls that are barriers: critical, hypocritical, political, parasitical, egotistical, hysterical, and biblical. And again, we're going through these because we want you to see if there's some things you might need to be aware of in your own life that might be a barrier. Yes, you long for relationship. Yes, you want intimate friendships and connection, and I get that. But sometimes, are you putting up a barrier for those things to be happening in your life? Because if you want those things, these are things to be aware of.
Yeah. So we didn't do a question of the week to start it. The question of the week, since we'll conclude it, is which one do you struggle with? I'll go first. I kind of already talked about it, but I definitely struggle with being too critical, and I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. Which one do you struggle with the most?
Well, hold on. Let's just set in that moment. Why do you think you're so critical?
I shared it is because of the environments that I grew up that had a hyper focus on perfectionism, not excellence, but then they used the term excellence. Oh, we're just doing things in excellence. No, we're not. You're doing things in perfectionism. And I kind of would run with that same excuse, so to speak. Oh, no, I just want things excellent. No, I wanted things perfect, and perfect was killing me. And so once you really challenged me on that, honestly, it's been a mountain I've had to climb, so to speak, with becoming less critical. I'm praising myself for where I'm at today compared. Obviously, I can still get better, but I'm gonna take a moment and celebrate myself for being a lot less critical of specifically even other human beings and keeping things to myself. So
yeah, no, that's good. I would say for me, it would be a blend of 2 of them. Definitely critical. I already talked about how.
I struggle with all of these, but
we're very similar in wanting things to be done in excellence. And a lot of times I'll say I want this in excellence, and sometimes maybe that there's a fine line between excellence and perfection, and I get that. But I feel like I have also done a lot of work over the last 4 or 5 years, and maybe the pendulum has sometimes swung too far the other way. I know you and Britt and some of the other ones on the team are like, hey, can you care about this a little bit more?
Just a little bit more.
But there are still some things I'm critical on, and I'm working on that. And I would say it probably goes right along with, and I would say maybe anyone that's critical, it goes along with egotistical. You know, you are sometimes critical because you think your way is the right way.
Yeah.
Or you would do it better, or how I live in my experiences is the right way to live. So then you're critical of everyone else and the choices they make because they're different than what you're walking in. Now, sometimes they may be better, sometimes not, but we always think that they're better. So I would say there's a blend there. With everyone that might be critical, you probably got a little egotistical in the background as well, feeding the fuel to the fire of our criticalness.
Yeah. And so, listener, seriously be encouraged. You're doing a lot better than you think you are. It's just a lot less about you than you think it is. And I promise you, relationships will grow when we create safe environments that people can be themselves without you having to judge them or challenge them unless they're asking for that. And again, that takes time. So we want to encourage you around your relationships. Hopefully you can begin to eliminate some of these barriers in your life so that you can be a person that people find safety to and in. And with that, as always, know you're loved and there's nothing you can do about it.